Hello, I'm Thanera Bailey, President and CEO of the Sister Group. Welcome to our Social Change Career Speaker Series. Today we're joined by Loy Namard, who is the Deputy Director for the Social Innovation Fund at the Corporation for National and Community Service. We're very excited to hear about her career journey from different forms of national service to her now role with the Social Innovation Fund and their role in investing in social impact. I'm also joined by one of our former interns. She just recently graduated, yay, from USC, Katie Hussey-Sloniker. I'll let her introduce herself very briefly, Katie, if you want to.
Sure. My name is Katie Hussey-Sloniker, and I currently live in San Juan, Puerto Rico, assigned here with the U.S. military as a military family member. And basically, I just graduated, as Thanera said, with an MSW that's focused on COPA, community organizing, and program management. And I'm about to be back to D.C.
So we're very excited to have you, Katie, to join us. And our speaker series highlights the career journey of individuals who are working for social changes for social good. And we're so excited to have you with us today, Loy. If you have any questions for those of you that are watching the broadcast, feel free to type them in the chat box, and I'll try to incorporate them into our live conversation at any point. If you're running into any technical difficulties, the screen freezes, just refresh your screen and it should bring you right back up. But we're looking forward to a really exciting conversation. So why don't you introduce us to Loy?
Sure, thanks, Thanera. My name is Loy Namard, and as Thanera said, I'm the Deputy Director of the Social Innovation Fund at the Corporation for National and Community Service. The CNCS is the federal agency that's responsible for service and volunteering, so they're particularly known for AmeriCorps and Senior Corps. I've been with this agency since 2000 and with the Social Innovation Fund specifically since 2012. I was in various roles in AmeriCorps, starting as a program officer and ending as deputy director at one point and acting director. And then now with the Social Innovation Fund, where our focus is on identifying social programs that are promising, so they have evidence that they're having an impact on the lives of people and then helping them to grow. I've lived in Washington, D.C. since 2000. In my personal life, I'm the chair of my giving circle, the African American Women's Giving Circle. And I'm also on the board of the local nonprofit Samaritan Ministry of Greater Washington. So that's kind of me.
That's great. So not only in your professional life are you interested in kind of investing in social change, but also in your personal life. That's great to see this kind of full circle piece. And how long has the Social Innovation Fund? It hasn't been with the corporation the whole time like AmeriCorps. It's relatively new, right?
It is. It was created in 2009. It was one of Obama's programs that he focused on when he first started. So it was created in 2009. We did our first grant making in 2010. So in the life of a federal program, fairly new.
Right. So with the role as a deputy director, I know this question doesn't really ever make sense, but I always ask it, and you can kind of pick the range that makes the best sense for you. But what's a typical day, week, month look like in this role? What are some of the daily tasks or the monthly responsibilities?
Sure. I'm sure everybody says there is no typical day, week, or month. That's definitely the case, but some of the typical activities that take place regardless. One thing is, there's definitely a lot of meetings. I probably spend more time in meetings than I do outside of meetings. But some of the ones I do regular check-ins with staff, whether it's weekly or bi-weekly. Lots of conversations, meetings on different topics within the Social Innovation Fund, as well as with other organizations outside of CNCS, and then with other departments within CNCS. And that could be about this specifically, about strategizing about connected, interrelated issues that we're all working on. Ad hoc, troubleshooting ad hoc processes and issues that arise, strategizing about how to, with a program officer, for instance, about how to address an issue that a grantee is facing with. developing policies and procedures, a lot of reviewing work of folks or reviewing documents that we want to put out. So various types of activities, but every day definitely looks different, which is good. There's a good and a bad. It's always interesting. On the other hand, sometimes you think there's more of a routine. Maybe you need to be more proactive rather than reactive, but in the end, it's all good.
Right, with 16 years kind of in this space, whether in this role at Social Innovation Fund or at AmeriCorps, you definitely want some change because it could probably get a little bit monotonous if it wasn't kind of ongoing. This is kind of a second deputy director role. Like you mentioned, you were deputy director with AmeriCorps and acting director at one time. What do you think are the big differences between being deputy director at AmeriCorps and being at Social Innovation Fund? Or are there?
The biggest difference is probably newness of the Social Innovation Fund. Means that oftentimes you're dealing with issues that haven't been dealt with before, and so you're still, even a few years in, thinking about policies and putting systems and processes in place. So there's that newness of it, which definitely makes it interesting. And then just because the program itself is new, there's still the establishing what we're all about in terms of our the face that we put forward externally, the relationships we're developing. So that definitely is a big difference from AmeriCorps, which is much older and established. And a lot of the organizations that we're working with in AmeriCorps have been there from the beginning. So that's a big difference.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's probably a more established knowledge in the AmeriCorps world or in the kind of traditional CNCS programming. And then with social innovation, it's part of the name, the innovation piece. You get to constantly kind of think about new ways to address issues, which it can be a blessing and a curse. Sometimes you need a little bit of format and sometimes not. What do you think has been maybe one of the biggest challenges in this role as deputy director at Social Innovation?
I probably the fact that I've had to take on the acting role in the Social Innovation Fund a couple of times in the relatively short period of time I've been here. So it's a relatively new program. It's been a priority of the administration since we've been around, so it kind of has that profile and that that element to it that you always have to be thinking about. But we've gone through some leadership changes during the time that I've been here. About within weeks after being selected as deputy director, the director, who herself had only been on for a few weeks, decided it was time to move on from the corporation. So I became acting director while I still tried to get to know what the Social Innovation Fund was.
I learned my job, and now I'll be my boss.
And I had to do it once more. Our most recent director, Michael Smith, he was selected by the administration to take on My Brother's Keeper initiative, and so then I had to be acting for a period of time again. And so that always comes with its challenges, but the first time when I was also trying to understand what is this thing was definitely probably the most challenging time.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't imagine having to take that on within weeks of you're still kind of navigating your own role and then trying to be your supervisor at the same time. And I know AmeriCorps has a large staff nationwide, working on state level and national level as program officers, and kind of in that deputy director role, you have quite a bit of staff management responsibilities. Is the same true with Social Innovation Fund?
Not smaller program. The Social Innovation Fund is roughly a $50 million program. We were $70 million for a couple of years, but $50 million for most of our life, whereas AmeriCorps is in the couple $100 million. We have 6 program officers, essentially, and then a training manager and a program assistant, so much smaller.
Mm-hmm. What do you think is some of the skills related to kind of staff management and people who you've had to supervise? Because in your roles, probably at least the last 10 years, you've had quite a bit of staff management piece that are part of it.
Yes, definitely. Well, one thing I would say that I feel like isn't talked about enough is that everybody is not supervisor material, and it's important to, as you're looking for leadership opportunities, unfortunately, they almost always come with, well, the next step is you should supervise, but think about whether that's something you really want to do and what are the opportunities that don't require that. I actually don't love supervising, but it's definitely been part of the work. In AmeriCorps, at one point when I was acting and we're going through the leadership, the presidential administration change and that leadership transition, I had 19 people reporting to me, which is just not a good idea because it's not helpful for the staff. So I love the size we're dealing with here. It's really trying to be open to different personalities and the different needs that people have, and figuring out what works for them is really critical, because you'll have people who need the regular frequent check-ins and touches, even though they might not need it in order to do their work. They just feel that they have to have that, versus the ones that want to be just left alone to do their job. So try.
Uh-oh.
Yeah.
It's frozen.
The other thing I would say is for folks to feel that you're open for them to come to when they need to, on whatever works for them. But some of the complaints I've heard, when people do complain about supervisors, just not feeling that they're really accessible and that they really want to, they feel like they're bothering them, they're just not around. I think that's another key to figuring out how you give the impression that you are open and accessible.
Yeah, I love your candor in that, not everybody enjoys being a supervisor. And it is kind of that natural step. Once you get into a particular position in leadership, it's like, okay, now people should report to you. And you're right, it's not everyone's gift. It's not everyone's talent or in their leadership style. I often talk with my interns. I'm very much a hands-off manager, and that need that some people have to kind of just have a check-in, just for check-in's sake, to kind of have a high-touch environment just because that helps them feel part of the team, can be a real challenge with my management style, which is you were hired for a job, you're kind of good. If you need something, you'll find me. And then they're like, but you never want to ask me anything. And I that point about being accessible, I feel like I'm super accessible, but that might be a problem for somebody who's really seeking a supervisor to come to them, kind of check in with them. So I appreciate that, because I don't think we hear that enough from people in leadership. Everyone kind of just assumes that once you get to a certain level, supervision becomes very easy, and I don't think it's not everyone's gift, and also it's not everyone's style meshes with everyone's needs. So I love that piece. Katie, I'm sorry, did you have something you were going to add, Lauren?
Well, no, I actually was very curious. You said your organization is very new, and I know we're going to talk about the grant-making part of what the SIF does. But since your organization is very new and was created under Obama, do you feel like the upcoming political election could have an impact on your organization at all, and the ability to grant make?
Yeah, that definitely is a consideration, and something that we won't know for sure until it happens. But the Corporation for National Community Service itself, every year, especially the last few years, when it comes to the budget, there's a time of wondering what's going to happen, and the right folks having the conversations they need to have been zeroed out in the budget until it comes time that the budget is actually passed, and then we find our funding. And then SIF individually has experienced that as well. Last year, it actually was kind of touch and go whether or not we would end up being funded. So I think looking forward, when you talk about a whole administration change, it's definitely a consideration as well. It looks like we're going to have two very different potential options for president. I think either the Social Innovation Fund, as well as CNCS, probably will look different, and it's hard to say exactly what that will be like. So yeah, it's a real consideration what exactly will happen. We do feel confident about what the SIF is about itself. It's not a political thing, because it's about focusing resources, whether it's federal resources or other resources, only on the programs that we know are effective. So that's something everyone can get behind. But we were created by Obama and are seen as an Obama program, so it's something to contend with.
As a supervisor, again, back to that piece, how do you manage that? Because I know, having worked with AmeriCorps programs, it is that kind of every year, what's the budget? Are we going to be around? How do you, one, support your staff in that like anxiety that comes with, layoffs or questionable employment
Right.
security? And also, as a leader, how do you help the programs that you fund to feel secure in their resources and the kind of pipeline where they come from?
Yeah, it's a tough one because you always want to be open and honest. And so when you genuinely don't know, that's all you can say. On the program side, we're always, as you'll remember, encouraging programs to make sure they're letting the folks within whose constituency they are know about the good work that they're doing and about where their funding comes from, so folks can follow the money, so to speak, and know this is having an impact in my community and this is a federal agency that's funding it. On the staff side, we've quite figured that out. Now, in the immediate term, say we weren't funded next year, we still have programs that would be going on for a few years because many of them received funding for, say, 2 years up front or 3 years up front. But still, there is that anxiety, and it's something that folks contend with. We're filling a program officer position now, and I'm sure we've heard that in interviews before. They're asking that question and making that determination whether they even apply or not based on what they think the longevity is or whether or not there's a question of it. So I don't think we have a good answer. You just try to be supportive of folks, be open, and understand if they're saying, due to this uncertainty, I really need to be thinking about maybe what my next move is.
Yeah. On that kind of grant making piece, I know, we kind of had this conversation before the conversation started about the challenge of kind of entering this space, whether it's kind of traditional philanthropy or, in this case, federal grant making or federal investments in programming. What do you think for someone who wants to enter this field, wants to be a grant maker, wants to be a program officer? What are some of the things they can do to either learn about opportunities or begin to start on that path for a career?
Mm-hmm. So in terms of, so you're thinking about the experience they need to have, or how do they even find
I
a
think
job?
probably even fine. I mean, again, because of being connected, I know some of the places maybe they might look. But if you just graduated from college and maybe you're interested in moving to the DC area, how do you learn about the grant making organizations in the federal space compared to maybe working for the Department of Agriculture or, because I think for many of our students, they understand that there's government jobs, but they may not see the alignment with the traditional kind of nonprofit roles that exist within
Right.
the federal government.
Right. Yes, definitely. So there's a general website for looking that opportunities have to be posted on USAJOBS, and I think it gives you lots of different opportunities of how you search. So when you look through that, you can find the ones that are kind of related to grant making. I forget exactly how they term it, but doing a search that way will give you a sense of what is out there. And probably almost all federal agencies have some grant making arm to them. Their innovation funds and tiered evidence initiatives similar to the Social Innovation Fund, and then other grant making as well, whether it's at the Department of Ed or Department of Agriculture or HHS. There definitely is a lot out there in terms of grant making in the federal space.
So, in building on that question, kind of what you started to say, what are some of the skills? So when you all are looking for kind of the entry level, I know you're probably not hiring the entry level staff, but maybe some of the people who are new to this role that maybe don't have that much experience in federal grant making, they're not coming in as a senior program officer. What are some of the skills they should come to the table with as a baseline?
So I definitely find myself, and I actually have a stack of resumes I need to look at tonight. I find myself looking for, do they have some background in grant making? Is good. It's nice to have at least some of that in the mix of our pool of program officers that are working with our programs, but not everybody necessarily needs to have that. We have folks with some government experience. We have folks that their experiences in philanthropy, and others that their experiences just in the nonprofit sector. But definitely we're looking for folks with some experience in one of those areas that they can bring to the table, bring to the mix. It'd be nice if they also have background in one of the general areas that we fund, which are pretty broad: youth development, which is a lot of education, health, and economic opportunity. But really, in general, just showing an obvious connection, because the first step is, and this is a critical thing, particularly with federal government, the first cut of your resume isn't really done by people who are doing an intensive look to think about how you fit. It's about the words that you use, et cetera, that gives you a score. And generally speaking, we end up looking at the applications, sometimes only the ones that score 100 or the ones that score 90 and above. And so it's really about that first step, how you're able to make it obvious in your written application or resume, the connection to exactly how the job description is written. And so then once we have those and we're looking through them, then we're trying to get a sense for, do they seem to have, does what they present on paper seem to have a real connection to the work that we're doing? You know, there's some nonprofit, social sector kind of work that there seems to be a connection that even if the skills aren't obviously connected, we might take a chance in that at least a first round interview to see what's there.
Okay. I didn't even know about the scoring. It makes sense with the amount of things that are coming in through USAJOBS that you all are not seeing the hundreds of applications that might be for you. But that might be a real challenge if someone doesn't write their cover letter or their resume with the kind of buzzwords or keywords that are in the job description, if it's kind of be filtered out with a kind of a computer. So that's a really good tip. What would you say?
Because sometimes some of the resumes we see that score high, when we look at them, there's no obvious connection, but somehow they wrote it in a way that it scored 100 or in the high 90s.
Okay, that makes sense. Would you recommend for people who maybe are new and haven't had the kind of 5 areas that you mentioned, like philanthropy or grant making, should they look to kind of build those skills through volunteer work? I know you mentioned you sit on the board of an organization, you're part of your giving circle in DC. Are there ways that maybe outside of professional skills they might be able to build some of those, or work experience, I'm sorry, they might be able to build some of those professional skills?
Absolutely. I think that if you genuinely have an interest in this area and either you don't currently have that, you don't have that background yet or that experience yet, or maybe you're making a switch from whatever it'll show on your resume you've done previously, being able to demonstrate through work that you've done, it could be volunteer work, that you're really interested and passionate in this and have some background and understanding of the issue and of the sector is really important.
That's great. Katie, did you have any other questions? And for anyone in the audience, again, you can type your questions in the chat box and I'll be happy to incorporate them into the conversation.
Yeah, actually I did. So, Boy, you had mentioned that there were 6 program officers that reported to you, and you said there were 3 areas of investment that the SIF does. So I'm assuming that each program officer does like a few of the grants, I guess, within the portfolio of each one of those areas. What is a typical day like for a program officer? You've told us your typical day. What is their typical day like?
Yeah, so yes, each of them has a portfolio of grantees. It depends on the year and the background of the program officer, but sometimes we're able to group them so they primarily have a particular type or focus of organization or what the organization is focused on. Other times it might be a mixed portfolio. They are the primary liaison with that organization, so they're going to have regular check-ins, whether they're weekly with a brand new organization or twice a month or monthly. They are reviewing progress reports. They're giving them feedback. They're strategizing with them when an issue comes up, how to address it. They're having conversations with our Office of Grants Management. Evaluation is a big piece of the work that we do, so there are regular conversations with the Office of Research and Evaluation as well about the work of the program officers and how best to support them. There definitely is a lot of kind of desk work, but then at the same time they try and get out. We try to get them out at least a few times a year to actually meet with their program. Sometimes it's about monitoring, other times about technical assistance, especially new grantees, and occasionally funding allows just to meet the program so they have a better sense of the folks that they're dealing with. And then they're all involved. They all have lead on a particular project, whether it's oversight and monitoring or evaluation, and then they're involved in a lot of working groups that just helps support the work that we do across the board.
Do they ever, I'm just curious, do they ever actually seek out programs to think that they think the SIF should invest in, or are the programs brought through like an invitation or a competitive process?
Right, yes, it's a competitive process, and we have to be careful with government grant making. So we don't directly seek out individual organizations, but as we're in a particular grant competition, we're trying to get the word out. The program officers will help us strategize about what the best way to do that. The organizations, maybe associations or regional organizations to get the word out to. We don't do too much direct work of seeking out individual organizations, though.
Thank you.
Sure.
Having been with CNCS now, so you said you came in 2000, correct? How do you continue to build your skills? So, you know, when you work for one agency, even though you've moved definitely in different roles, so of course there's the natural professional development that comes with role change. How do you keep on top of just your own kind of growth and professional development to be able to allow you to take on these acting roles when you're forced into them, as well as to kind of shift from the agency over this kind of 16-year period?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it hasn't been, I think in the ideal world, I would be that intentional, but it actually hasn't been the way to play it out. It definitely has been learning as you go, and as something, you take something on, then just kind of figuring out how to do it and moving forward. I do, when I can, try to get out to conferences every now and then, because that can be helpful, just the simple socializing, networking, interacting with others, but also the topic area as well, since the Grant Makers for Effective Organizations. I was at the recent conference in the Twin Cities, and things like that can definitely be helpful. But really, it has been just on the job. I remember when the first acting director for AmeriCorps came up, it definitely would never have been something I would have sought out. It just made sense in terms of the change in administration, and they were kind of divvying us up. The other acting director took this on, and I took AmeriCorps on, and it was a huge thing, and it was just put your head down and just move forward and try to figure it out.
Yeah, you did a great job. I was connected to AmeriCorps when you were acting director, so I remember that time period. So I can definitely see how I think most people were not as intentional about our professional development as we probably should be, and life just kind of naturally gives us these opportunities. I just wondered if maybe there was a specific way that you were thinking about that. We did have a question from the audience. Heather was wondering, what are the typical sizes of the organizations that you fund?
Mm-hmm. So first, I would say the Social Innovation Fund, a relatively small program, but our grants are relatively large. So the minimum grant size is $1 million, and the maximum is $10 million. So because of that, we tend not to fund smaller organizations. But also, our role is we fund the intermediaries, and then we leave it up to them to identify the local organizations. The smaller organizations come up through the intermediaries. So we have some United Ways are probably the smaller organizations that we fund. We only fund grant makers. So local United Ways are probably the smaller organizations we fund, and then we have some large organizations like Silicon Valley Community Foundation, which is one of the largest community foundations out there, and the Local Initiative Support Corporation list that's national and all over the country. So there's quite a range, and no typical size. That gives you a sense of what their capacity needs to be, because they're managing a $1 million grant from us that they need to match with $100 million. So it's $2 million size program minimum.
Great. Are there any, when you think about kind of back on your career, anything that you're most proud of or most kind of seen as an accomplishment for good or social change, or just that you felt like this is really effective, what I played a role in or a part in supporting?
I mean, although it was a difficult time, when I look back on that period of time with AmeriCorps State and National during the transition, which I forget how long it ended up being, and there was a lot going on at that time. We expanded AmeriCorps, we got the Recovery Act, and so while I don't think everything did not go as ideally I would have if I was able to sit back and be proactive and actually had staffing and support, but I think we did accomplish a lot and did it fairly well. So I think looking back, I try not to look back on it too often, but when I do, I actually feel good about how it went.
You can pat yourself on the back and then keep moving forward, right? What do you look forward to maybe in the next year or two of your career, in this role or wherever life may lead you in these next couple of years? What are some of the things that you're hoping to gain or be a part of?
Mm-hmm. So I think I like the grant making world and work, and one of the reasons why I got involved in the giving circle was because government grant making, especially when it was AmeriCorps, where I was at the time when I started, is pretty prescriptive and specific about what you can do and how you can do it. And so I like the idea of just individuals getting together, pooling their funds, deciding who they want to fund, what the rules are, and then just doing it. And so SIF has been a little bit broader, definitely, in terms of approach than AmeriCorps, which I appreciate. I think ultimately maybe I'd like to be in the foundation world, so there's a little bit less of the layer of government restrictions that you have no control over. So I think looking down the road, that sounds interesting to me. But ultimately, I like the idea of being in grant making in some way, in philanthropy, and getting folks the resources to do what they need to do and what they know is best for their communities.
Yeah. This is kind of a side note, but with your giving circle, are there any particular things that you all have funded or supported that you are really excited about or passionate about?
It's been fascinating just to learn about the work happening they otherwise wouldn't have. So it's called the African American Women's Giving Circle, and the focus is on organizations led by and serving African American women and girls, although not necessarily exclusively. There was one, I think it was 2 years ago we first funded them, and it's an organization, Breast Care, for Washington, D.C., and they started up east of the river and focused on bringing this amazing technology that normally you have to go to more well-resourced communities to get around breast care, breast cancer detection, et cetera. And it was fun to get in on the early years of the amount of money we gave them wasn't huge, especially compared to what they were getting from others, but it was neat just to feel a part of that, bringing that really high-tech resource to communities that often they're the first ones getting that.
Right. It sounds extremely interesting and needed. I know African American women aren't necessarily diagnosed with breast cancer as often, but they tend to be fatal diagnosis when they do. So it's I think a lot of that has to do with access to care and resources like these kind of screening and technology that are in some communities. So, I mean, exactly kind of the mission of what you're able to do with that giving circle. And it probably provides a little bit of balance with having so much bureaucracy in your day-to-day giving with the last 16 years or more of your career, and then having this kind of passion and kind of real connected to the ground investment that you're able to make through the giving circle. With either this role or basically maybe when you think about the kind of trajectory of your career, what are some of the key skills that you think you needed to be able to sit in this place today?
I think my role, there's a big operational aspect to it, so the ability to reflect on a challenge, not necessarily a challenge, just work that needs to be done, and think about the systems, the processes to put in place to help facilitate that work happening as efficiently as possible. First for the staff, but then also for the grantees as well. I think that is key, and it's something I've used a lot. Figuring out the right process that makes sense. It hopefully is as not as bureaucratic as it potentially could be, that helps folks to get the work done. That's been big. And then the openness and ability to collaborate with others is definitely key. There's nothing you can get done here, at least not efficiently, without collaborating with others. Even if it's just your work you need to get done, there's so many other people that impact on it or need to touch it for it to happen, that piece has been really important. I think I've evolved in that over time, the ability to just engage with a wide range of personalities and figuring out how to work and cajole the folks that maybe their first instinct isn't to do their job in the way you need them to do it. So
Right.
that piece is really, really critical.
Yeah, I think collaboration is something people underestimate as a key part of pretty much any leadership role, like the ability to work not only within your organization, but outside of your organization. And particularly if you're in a funding role or a grant making role, having to work and understand these people that work external of your day to day, how do they make make it possible for you to reach your results? If you're not able to collaborate around that, will be really, really challenging. Um, when you think about kind of your academic career that connected you to this, are there any particular aspects of your academic background that you feel prepared you for today or didn't, or that you wish you had taken advantage of while you were in your academic programs?
Yeah. Yeah, that's an interesting question. My undergrad was business econ at a liberal arts college, Mills College in California. And then grad school was at the University of Pittsburgh in their public affairs grad school. I think maybe nothing very, very directly that comes to mind, but in general, there was an international development dimension to the work that I was doing. So that's kind of sensibility and appreciation for understanding or knowing that you need to understand the needs of local communities and how best to serve those needs, and thinking about from their perspective what is needed. I think general orientation has stayed with me and has been helpful in any community development kind of work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I could definitely see that, particularly with your roles in AmeriCorps. It's so easy to kind of sit in the space of your role at the corporation and not necessarily understand the local dynamics. I know we saw that sometimes working in a national program, even though you're trying to implement the same program across the country, what is happening in a rural community versus an urban community versus a large school system and a small school system, and the ability to maneuver with those is key. And I think even though you're playing kind of an administrative and monitoring role, it's important to understand that those influences of community and those local issues will impact their ability to meet whatever you've outlined in your grant. And so being able to write the RFP or write the evaluation in a way that allows for that flexibility but still meets kind of national dynamics, I think is probably essential, and I think probably underestimated some in your role.
Yeah, definitely. And when grantees are implementing their program, they're coming to us about challenges they're facing in a particular community, trying to figure out where we're always thinking, okay, what are the boundaries? What does the law say? And then what can we do within that? And how can we be as flexible as possible? So I think keeping that orientation is really important. Knowing what the ultimate goal is, that is to have an impact on that community. So how can we do that within the confines that are given to us?
Yeah. One other aspect of this that I wonder about is kind of how do you feel about your understanding, or how do you grow that understanding of national policy? I know for me, when I was placed in the role running a national AmeriCorps program, it was amazing how much I needed to know about kind of how national policy decisions happened and how you interact with your legislators, and how that influences the stream of funding.
Right.
I'm sure that also plays, I mean, not in an advocacy role, but just truly having to know who makes the decisions around your, like, this budgeting, or like if the administration changes, how that might happen, or whoever is in charge of a particular committee, how that might change things. How do you keep informed about these kind of big picture national policy issues, when your job is big enough, but you do have to kind of have a little bit of a pulse on these things that are happening?
Yeah, absolutely. We're fortunate that the agency, and probably all federal agencies, have a government relations office or something with a name similar to that. So they definitely keep us abreast, and that's really helpful. And then the political role, which is the director of the program, he has a role of actually going out, developing relationships and trying to get the word out. We try to focus on, as we know about, well, one, of course, just trying to make sure the program is as solid as possible. And then how are we documenting and telling the story of the work that we're doing, and so that the folks who actually are out there having to go out and have those conversations on the Hill and wherever else are armed with what they need to tell the story and talk about how effective we are. I'm fortunate, I think, in that I don't have to be the one directly doing all that, but I'm very cognizant of how important the work that I am doing is to having something to say, to having a story to tell, and to be able to say, yes, we are having an impact. These people are being served. People are being served by effective programs that otherwise would not have. This is an impact on their lives, etc. But that piece is so critical. You can't lose sight of it, because that's funding. You won't be able to, these communities won't be able to get the services that they need.
Right, just that simple change, like you said, change in administration, and poof, it could be gone. It's a really interesting dynamic that I don't think really sits in a lot of other sectors who work on social change or social good. Your funding always is up for grabs. Very few organizations have 100% fiscal security, but I do think, the fact that it's not something about like, we only will fund you for so long. It really could just be, this is no longer a priority for the administration, or this, the change of the guard in the Congress now doesn't want to appropriate the amount of money that it actually takes to do it. And it's nothing that you could have controlled. It really just is something that's kind of external. But I think your point that just being aware, but also, keeping it at arm's length is so important. Did you have any final questions, Katie, before I jump into my couple last questions? And again, anyone from the audience, if you have a question, feel free to ask.
I do. Again, everything that you're saying, Loy, I love. And as an MSW, that is what actually attracted me to the program I was in. Are there very many MSWs in your field, or are they all business, like you said, or public administration? Or, I mean, how as an MSW can I break into this? And by the way, I'm an MSW MBA, so I am kind of that combo. So I'm just curious, though, do you see very many MSWs in your field, in the social innovation?
Yeah, we really see a range, and I think about from AmeriCorps to here as well. We see a range of backgrounds: social work, business, law. We've had people with law degrees. So it's really a range of backgrounds that we've seen. So it's really about demonstrating the passion and interest and skills that you can bring to bear in the area. But thinking about the MSW in particular, I would see a definite connection, because most likely you'd be able to show that you really do care about change in people's lives and how best to make that happen. So I think you'd be able to make that connection for folks.
Right, and about evidence-based programs, and about outcomes-based programs and communities. I mean, that again, that's the specialty that a lot of the MSWs working with the NERA in our internship. That's what we're specialized in.
hmm And yeah, I didn't talk about this specifically, but that is so critical right now. And obviously in the work SIF does, because that's all we're about, but in all funding, grant making, is evidence-based programming and outcomes, and being able to show that you understand that, understand the importance of that, because needs are increasing, resources are not keeping pace, so we have to direct our funding to what we know is effective. And how you know that's effective is by are you tracking data? What are your outcomes showing? Is the programming based on evidence, based on something that says it's likely to be successful? So yes, that's a great point. It's critical.
How do you balance at SIF this idea of innovation and kind of evidence based? So, I think sometimes there's a challenge. As an organization, we face this. We do things very different than what has been done before, and it is innovative. And we can show it because I understand that idea of evidence based and making sure you have the data. But how do we in the sector really make space for opportunity and for innovation that maybe needs to be tried or tested a little bit? And particularly, how does SIF view that? Because I know you're investing in some things that are that they work, but maybe the way you're investing or the way that you're putting resources into it is at a different scale than has done before. So how do you balance that evidence and innovation?
Yeah, that is definitely a tension. We have folks all the time who say, you're not funding innovation. That program's been around forever. So for us, what we have done is we're not funding the leading edge of the innovative programs. We've decided that the role for government, or at least the government program, is the way to spend the funds most wisely, to choose the programs that have some evidence behind them. We have a pretty wide range. We have the first level that's called preliminary, all the way up to strong. And the preliminary level is not, there can be some pre-post types of work, but definitely we're focused on not that initial stage, but there's some work behind it to show that it has some promise, and then taking it to the next level. But I think you're absolutely right. There has to be room for that first stage. So it's some organizations just need to decide, this makes sense for us, or maybe some percentage of our funding, which is something we've thought about, a percentage of our funding that we're going to allow to be more risky because it's worth it to see what might come out of it. And then this percentage we're going to focus on more of a sure bet. And like you said, even though some of the programs we're funding have been around for a while, there's something new that they're trying to do. They're trying to do it with a new population in a new geographic area, or through their research, they found that it's not doing exactly what they want to do. They're having an impact on certain outcomes but not others, so they want to tweak it and see what they can do to improve its effectiveness. And so that's a piece that we're funding. So even when it's a program that's been around for a while, there's something different about what we're funding, but also leaving space for more risk is really critical as well, definitely.
Yeah, I think that it's a challenge because particularly with federal funds, you don't want to be accused of wasting resources on something, and so you don't maybe have the money that an independent philanthropy organization might be able to just say, well, we'll just give you $100,000 to or $1 million to see if it works. You have to be able to show a lot more in that. One of the questions from the audience was, how does SIF evaluate your program? So how do you show, I know you have like Pay for Success and a few other ways, but what are some of the ways that you show that it is effective what you're investing in?
Mm-hmm. So there are two different things. So one is every program that we fund has to be rigorously evaluated. So we fund the intermediary. They select nonprofit organizations that might be coming in with their individual interventions that fit whatever the ultimate goal is the intermediary is interested in, or maybe the intermediary comes with its own program and selects organizations to implement it. Either way, the intervention itself, the program, has to be rigorously evaluated, and we provide a lot of support with that. the funding for the evaluation is included in their budgets, which is great because often people say everybody thinks evaluation is important, but nobody's funding it. So we definitely consider that important to support that. And so we're looking at success that way. We're starting to now, evaluation reports are starting to come out. And one thing that's critical because of the nature of the work, what we talked about before, success for us isn't that an evaluation says positive results. Success for us is that evaluation was implemented correctly, and then we're learning from it. So it could be positive, null, mixed findings, but what is that telling us about the intervention in that particular area with that population? So there's that level of evaluation. Then we've also done an assessment of the SIF itself, and the results started to come out last year, and that luckily showed that we actually have had an impact on the intermediaries that we're working with in terms of their capacity for evaluation and other things. The evaluator compared the intermediaries we funded with like organizations that were not funded and saw that there was some positive impact to the SIF as a program.
Yeah, I think that point you made about the lack of investment in evaluation, there's a lot of talk about, making sure you have strong outcomes, that you're showing either positive change or significant impact, and, not the resources to have the rigor. Maybe they can run kind of some simple pre and post testing or maybe a survey at the end, but not to have an external evaluator who's on board all year. Right. Looking at their programming. And I think that's the way and I love that you're not just looking for success in the sense of did A equal B and it was positive, but that maybe it didn't work. Because I think sometimes that's a place that we're not questioning enough, that people have been doing things for 100 years and been able to show success, but it's not the best way to get from A to B, and because nobody's questioning that and nobody's evaluating that, we don't know to change course. We don't know to say, well, that was not the right way to do it, so we're not going to put any more resources behind that particular intervention or that particular strategy, because people can not necessarily always show success, but if you're trying to show a particular outcome, there are ways to maybe evaluate in that way, and if you're really evaluating rigorously, it's easier to kind of see the places for improvement and places to change. So I like that SIF has really thought about that. Kind of building on that, how do you feel your work in this role or maybe as an overall organization really makes a difference for social good or social change?
Mm-hmm. I think it does, and I do feel good about that. From when we're able to have conversations with the organizations we fund directly or the organizations they support about what the SIF has allowed them to do, it's really it's good to hear. We're hearing very positive things. So behind kind of the evaluation and the results, when you have that conversation, they're able to expand the work they're doing to more people. They're able to really focus on developing the systems and the capacity for evaluation, and in other ways things that they're able to do that they weren't able to do before the SIF. So that's been really important and helpful to hear. And then on a more maybe somewhat anecdotal level, when you get a chance to visit programs and actually meet with beneficiaries, that's great as well, to hear them talk about what this program got expanded to their community and what it's done for their life, whether it's a housing program or educational program, has been really incredible. I was telling someone just yesterday about the Corporation for Supportive Housing. We visited one of their programs, and they're dealing with people who are chronically homeless, and let's get them off the street, and then we treat their issues. And hearing, it was a panel of a couple men and a woman talking about what it felt like, and getting tears in their eyes, even the men saying, having their own key and being able to put it in their own lock and invite somebody over to my home. I mean, it was pretty incredible to hear them talk about the impact on their life, and that anecdotal piece. And the stories are always important, but knowing that there's evidence behind that program to know that it probably will have a long-term impact on them. They probably are going to be able to address their mental health issues or their alcohol abuse and be housed long-term and get a job. That's even more kind of inspiring and feel good.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the level of investment that you all are making, that 1 million to, do you say 10 million, really allows programs to not only evaluate, but to really invest in their programming. Because so often you're underfunded to do what you want to do, or the intermediary gets a smaller grant and isn't able to really share the resources in a way that really strengthens and raises up the programming. So if you really want to see innovation, again, it is making kind of that larger investment in what you know works and testing it. We kind of believe in that, and then being able to share it because it is federally funded. It becomes part of the kind of public domain of knowledge, and you know that this is how we create change for people who are suffering in this way, or this is how we address education in this particular way, because we've invested in innovation in a way that's federally funded. And so there's a good opportunity to not only invest and help those programs, but to also, again, kind of increase the sector, move the needle a little bit more for all programs that are running in this way by the knowledge that it's gained through this experience. Katie, any last question? Anyone from the audience before I ask my final question?
I do. Actually, you triggered one more question, and I'm really curious about this. We could keep talking for hours, but I know we have to stop. So during the closeout process of a grant, how do you ensure that now all this knowledge that you've learned and this great program has been created, how do you ensure as SIF that this organization will thrive and continue in the future as an organization if they're no longer receiving that investment?
Mm-hmm. That's a good question, definitely. We're still at the kind of the beginning edge of the closeout process. We have a couple of programs that ended early, but 2010 was our first grant making, so those programs are closing out their evaluation, et cetera. Some might have extended a little bit to get the work done. We build in from the beginning, and hopefully have been getting better about it as we go along, a plan that the grantees developing a plan for what does sustainability look like for us. So that's something ideally they're thinking about from the beginning and working on throughout the 5-year life of the grant. They also develop scaling plans, so they're thinking about on a program-wide level or at an individual program and sub-grantee level, what does growth look like and how will we sustain that growth? So it's really on an individual basis, them thinking about what it would take, and it looks different for different organizations. Some have, as a result of their experience with the SIF, got big grants to continue the work, a particular sub-grantee. Some are working with other federal agencies to say, hey, that our program is effective, it fits with your mission, you know, what can we, is it something that you would want to take on at some level? So folks are looking at it differently depending on their capacity, what they're focused on, etc. Definitely a critical piece. And on the larger R level, we're trying to make sure that we're showcasing, documenting the work that they've done. So the individual evaluation reports and the lessons learned from them, making sure that we're getting them out there so funders or other nonprofits can find out what works for the particular issue I'm interested in, the population that I'm serving.
Right, kind of creating that research bank or knowledge base that others can grow from. And I think, yeah, that's a great question, Katie, because I think with that level of investment, it's hard to replicate. And so either they have to have built that in, and I think, is it a long-term period that they're funded typically, Loy, or is it?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, over the course of that 5 years, they definitely have time to figure out what to do, or to build in, hopefully, some strategies to decrease their dependency on the funding.
Yeah. And the match requirement hopefully helps with that, because it's a pretty hefty match requirement. The SIF Classic, which is what we've been talking about, we recently started a Pay for Success program. But the basic SIF program is a one-to-one match in non-federal cash. So they're bringing in investors on the local level or sometimes national who believe in their program, and hopefully that will help with sustainability as well.
Yeah, the fact that it's cash in and of itself, because I know often that match, they might do it in kind, but that doesn't help you keep the lights on. And so it's good that they have a cash match in that way. And I think, you know, having looked at some of the organizations that you funded, they are kind of stronger organizations. And again, looking to that piece of being able to maintain it. It's that balance of innovation, but you do need to know that when you invest, that they're not going to be gone at the end of that 5 years, which makes that investment, again, of federal dollars less worthwhile. One last question from the audience. Does SIF ever fund individuals in one-on-one service? I would say no, right?
No, we don't. That's more probably AmeriCorps, National Service, maybe Vista type of thing.
Yeah, exactly. So it's still under the Corporation for National and Community Service, but it's kind of a
Not
very different kind of strategy compared to traditional Senior
exactly.
Corps or AmeriCorps programming, which I think is probably a huge change, but a needed change, having
Right.
seen kind of the change of growth of AmeriCorps over
Mhm.
time. There wasn't really a space for innovation because of the kind of
Right.
regulation that guides AmeriCorps, and then also this just the large scale investment that you are able to do with SIP. So
Exactly.
we're at the end of our time, so I just want to ask really quickly, what is the one piece of advice you would give to someone who was interested in having this type of position or in working in the field, national service or social innovation? What
Mhm.
is the piece of advice you would give them?
Yeah. So I would say a balance utilize a balance of being kind of planning out what you think makes sense and logical progression, but being open to a more circuitous route and the different ways that you can gain experience or different ways that you can get at the goal of the type of work that you want to do and the type of impact you want to have. Because it could be in a nonprofit, a small nonprofit organization. It could be in a philanthropic organization. It could be in government. It could even be in for-profit. There are many for-profit entities that are creating this arm that's about social good and how can I have an impact on the communities that I am serving. So it's important to kind of understand your goal and the things that you want to accomplish along the way to get there, but definitely being very open to the way that you might end up achieving that.
Right. There's like several paths to the same end result, and particularly the
Mhm.
change that you want to see. I like that because I don't think many people realize the opportunities. Like I didn't even realize until you said it. Like every federal agency has a grant making arm or has an innovation arm. Like you just really think more about the traditional kind of federal roles, but this might be the same way to maybe impact education on a large scale or agriculture on a large scale, to be in this role, helping programs and local farmers or local groups with investments and thinking about this in a way. So that's a really interesting and great piece of advice. Well, thank you so much, Lloyd, for giving so much of your time. We kind of went over so many good questions and conversation. It was great to reconnect with you and to hear about your new role and the kind of shift from AmeriCorps to Social Innovation Fund, and in this role as Deputy Director. And thank you so much for your time. Thanks, Katie, for joining and adding to the conversation. Leave
Thank
us.
you both.
Great. And for everyone that joined us, thank you. And this will be available after the recording online. Thank you so much. Have a great afternoon.